All right, here we go on this Friday. Activist Friday. Yep. Folks, there he is. Gabe Amo, the shame of the first district. Yep. Without question. Will people respond? I think they're going to respond. Yep. I believe it is. Call his office. Maybe he needs to hear from people. Maybe he didn't realize before he voted in that manner. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt here. Yep, 401-729-5600. What an absolute disgrace. Now we have a special guest that's going to join us coming up. It's going to shed light on what's going on. Seamus Bruner, his book, Revolutionary Queer Machine. Did Marxist revolutionaries have foreknowledge of the plot? We're going to talk to Seamus Bruner coming up, I think at 1:15. I think at 1:15. Whenever he pops in. But good afternoon, one and all. Folks, notice now local media is ignoring. There's Rose. Yes. There's Debbie. Happy Friday, says Debbie. Yep. She does a fantastic job. Yes, she does. There is our YouTube queen. But what an absolute embarrassment. Now, hi there, Mary. Yes, everybody's excited for the Friday, and it is beautiful weather, isn't it, folks? Wait a minute. Where did I see her? There she is. It's Jane Rice. Hi there, Jane. Now, the other thing, he does have that right. No one said he doesn't have the right. You know, this is where they confuse things. Dawn Wallace, he has a right to vote no. No one said he didn't have the right. That's not a logical take. Gian says the sound is good. He has a right to vote no. Well, he's voting. He has a right to vote yes or no. The question is, how did the people in the first district, Dawn, how did they want him to vote? See, he has a right to vote no. No one said he didn't have the right to vote no. The question is, was that the right vote? And does he represent everyone? That's a false statement, whoever Dawn Wallace is. There's Chuck. I wish I could go to J-Town. Chop Miss Charlie's. Yes. Of course he does. You know, Florida is looking better. Sue Smith is ahead of the curve, better than everyone. Bam is right. Everyone's excited on this Friday. We're going to begin in just 4 minutes, especially we have a great guest. Folks, and more as the program grows, he is hateful. He is hateful. Ryan is right. Yes, call the number. See, that is a false argument. There it is. Everyone can see. He has a right to vote. Who said he didn't have a right? But that's not the question. The question is not whether or not he has the right to vote no. The question is, how should he have voted? It was a resolution to honor. No, he has the right to it. No one said he didn't have the right. It's not about that. It's how the vote should have gone. So he is. Now, Seth Magaziner, Congressman, 2nd District, he voted yes. So what do you think of that? What do you think of them apples? Here's Dawn Wallace again. No, what do you mean? Stop complaining and vote your way. Oh, so people can't talk about it. Oh, people can't talk about it, Dawn Wallace. Really? So no one can talk about it. Everyone just be silent. Go along. Don't complain. Don't say anything. Just be quiet. No one should voice any opinion. Is that how it works? Dawn Wallace? How's the transitioning going, Dawn? Debbie does do an amazing job. I didn't call him that. One of the other people did. Are they not allowed to? Now, is it Don Wallace or Dawn? I didn't call him that. Ryan did. So, yes. Well, it goes beyond that, though, Linda. It's not about a page. Oh, okay. Didn't realize that. I didn't know that. What are your pronouns? I'm a lesbian, not transgender. Okay. What are your pronouns? They and them? Okay. No, you did not say. Okay, you're talking about the other person that did. Thank you, Janet Dwyer. We don't have time. We have time out. What do you mean ignorance? I asked the question. What are your pronouns? Why so defensive, Don? Oh, excuse me, Dawn. Why so defensive? It is. As long as you don't use them. Okay. Listen, she no, no, no. As long as she's not too insulting, as long as she doesn't start insulting me or some of you, no, she can stay. Dawn can stay. I did not say first of all, I'm not ignorant. And I'm just clarifying. You're really going to like our guest, Dawn. You're really going to like the guest coming up. All right. That's fine. Not a transgender. All right. Well, there are some people that are. Nope. No. All right. Dawn, you're commenting too much, though. I don't want to block you, but just like take a break. Just take a break, right? You don't have to comment on everything. So, and don't insult other people. That part we won't put up with. All right, we're going to start in just a moment. It's not ignorance. Ignorance is saying something akin to, I didn't say you're talking about me. All right, so chill out, Miss Dawn. We're going to start in just a moment. You're going to love the guests we have coming up, Dawn. Hey, I'm flattered that, many people have told me that I'm number one in that community. So I'm glad to see it. Yep. Good afternoon, Kara. Other people have a little more joyful. That's right. Dawn can voice her opinions as long as she is not insulting. All right, folks, we're going to start. Good afternoon, one and all. I'm going to come back to Gabe Amo. Yes, it is Friday. Yes, there's a lot going on right now, but we want to stay on topic. And again, I encourage people can voice different opinion, but when people start insulting everyone, and some people come in just to try to antagonize people, then that's where I draw the line. So, but this portion of our program on this beautiful, yes, it is ignorance, beautiful Friday, folks, is brought to you by PR Landscape Materials in Garden Center. Stop it and see them. 3688 Quaker Lane in North Kingstown. Especially, they have really outdone themselves. What a just tremendous job they have. And right now, fall is in the air, and it's beautiful weather for the weekend. Homegrown mums and kale are outstanding. Mums and kale sizes ranging 4-inch, 12-inch pots. They have pumpkins, straw bales, corn stalks, gourds, Indian corn, native vegetables, local honey, maple syrup. This is the ideal time for planting. Stop it and see them. They're open 7 days a week. It's PR Landscape Material and Garden Center. Nope, I don't like drama in the chat, but people can't just come in and start being insulting to everyone. No, we're live right now on X and on YouTube and also obviously on Facebook. There are some people that, and I'm not saying anyone right now, but there are some people, they believe their only existence on social media should be to what we call troll people. And that part will not be tolerated. So don't forget the Cohesive folks, proud sponsors of DePetro.com. Stop in and see them. Remember, lunch, dinner, drinks in the lounge. I love the Cohesive Inn. Plus, they have the coffee shop coming. They're open 7 days a week. The chef's menu is fantastic. What I love about the Cohesive Inn is there's something on the menu for everyone. Stop it and see them. 226 Cohesive Avenue, West Warwick. Remember, as I like to say, lunch, dinner, drinks in the lounge. They have a nice big bar area where you don't have people all on top of you. It is the Cohesive Inn. So now, I also want to caution that some people like to come in into what we call the chat, whether it be on Facebook or whether it is X or YouTube. And there are some people that their whole purpose, seemingly, is to troll people. And I encourage a lot of people, there's nothing wrong with, as you're watching, just treating it as if you're watching television. So, and I covered the trial back in the spring, and you had there were people that were jealous that I was on court TV. So they decided that they were going to then try to interfere with that. So I, we have great tolerance. They are hagbags. We have great tolerance, but unless people, if your purpose is to come into our program, right? You're not going to come into my house. I wouldn't walk into someone's house, spit on the floor, and sit down and expect that I'm just going to be, warmly greeted. So if there are people that act that way, we have no problem getting rid of them. If they are curious and want to hear the topics, hear the news of the day, that's fine, regardless of their background, who they are, as long as they don't start just insulting everyone else. And there are some people that do that. And what happened last night in Boston is, I agree, is an absolute disgrace. Where they had, and think about this, they had a vigil for Charlie Kirk, and who shows up? What type of counter protesters show up at a candlelight vigil because they don't like that? That's absolute. You know who does that? The progressive wing of the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party right now is almost on life support. And for people to do that, who would do something like that? Those people would. That's who would do something like that. Why would you show up? Oh, I'm just counter protesting at a candlelight vigil. There's something wrong with people that think that that is okay behavior. And so, and there is a thing called decency. And the other side, they're all upset. They're all upset about Jimmy Kimmel. And the local media, by the way, they love free speech. Suddenly they're concerned about free speech. When President Trump was removed from social media, they had no problem with it. Jimmy Kimmel celebrated when Tucker Carlson was taken off the air and removed from Fox. So he had the right, but then you can't fall back. By the way, Jimmy Kimmel may return to the airwaves. I don't know what's going to happen. I think, as I said earlier on the radio show, I think ABC is at a crossroads, and they're owned by Disney, and they're trying to decide, do we really want to deal with the fallout of shows like Jimmy Kimmel and The View? Jimmy Kimmel he's not a reporter. This isn't freedom of the press. Free speech, well, he's actually paid, number one. Number two, it was inappropriate. And it was the affiliates that carry the Jimmy Kimmel show that didn't like it. Now, I want to talk, though, about this Rhode Island representative, because this is one of those things. The rest of the media, as of so far, they're ignoring the story. We're not going to ignore the story. And I'm talking about Congressman Gabe Amo. But first, this portion of the program, I can't tell you enough. Forget about those stupid windmills offshore. Propane Plus. Propane is the way to go. Heating or cooling, you log on at propaneplus.com. Residential or commercial, that's how simple it is. They're available 24/7. You can depend on Propane Plus. You can call them 401-885-4209, or in Massachusetts, 508-252-3359 for Propane Plus. Yes, that went on quite a bit. And again, what was also interesting about that period of time was there were people, they were openly admitting that their only purpose was they were just trying to interfere. They didn't, you want to talk about lack of freedom of speech, that crowd, the delusional conspiracy crowd, they didn't like the fact that I was saying, no, I don't think that, 50 people are involved in a conspiracy and they took this guy out in the house. But this is what I want to touch on. So, I don't know who his audience has tanked. I believe you're talking about Jimmy Kimmel. I don't know. But Gabe Amo. So who is Congressman Gabe Amo? Congressman Gabe Amo, and Debbie, who exactly, I am curious. I don't want to get distracted, but I am curious, who are you talking about? Jimmy Kimmel? I think maybe he's talking about Jimmy Kimmel. So, but let's talk about Kimmel. Okay, Debbie, that's one of those things. We never know. I like to clarify. Then you should put Kimmel's audience. folks, because when you're using the words like he and him, my pronouns, and I'm live, you would think that, oh, you're talking about me. So, and now she says, but the local media that runs cover for this guy, Congressman Gabe Amo, this was the St. Germain seat. Then it became the Ron Makeley seat. Then it became the Patrick Kennedy seat. Then it became the Cicilline seat. And then now it's the Gabe Amo seat. So just to clarify, this is one of those things. I don't see anyone else in local media that's even touching the story, but they had a simple resolution in Congress. A simple resolution in Congress to have a resolution to honor Charlie Kirk. And Congressman Seth Magaziner voted in favor of it. Yes, it did pass. I believe all the Republicans voted against it. So that's all it was going to be, a resolution to honor Charlie Kirk. So Rhode Island Congressman Gabe Amo, who represents the 1st District. So some people get confused. The 1st District runs the northern part of the state, Woonsocket, Cumberland, Lincoln, Smithfield, and then it swings around East Bay, and it goes into Borrington, East Providence, Bristol, Warren, and then down into Portsmouth, Middletown, Newport, and then when you cross over Jamestown, when you cross over into North Kingstown, e.g., Narragansett, that then becomes 2nd District. So the 1st District is mostly big chunk of Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls. But what message is that? And I want to be clear. See, here we go. This is where these people just coming out of the woodwork. Isn't that graceful? So no, I'm not going to. I don't understand. These are people who just want to crash out, who just want to come in and try to disrupt things. But just to bring you up to speed, because it's not going to get the type of attention that it should. Seth Magaziner in the 2nd District voted in favor of it, but Rhode Island Congressman Gabe Amo voted against the resolution to honor Charlie Kirk. So maybe he should hear from some of his constituents. That's all. That is the only thing that I am saying. Now, folks, as we know, more and more info is coming out about this shooter. And as you also know, locally now, they've almost lost interest in the story because the more we're learning about the shooter, who he was involved with the chat, the whole situation with the roommate, and someone who has written about this, talked about it, director of research at the Government Accountability Institute. We are so happy to welcome to the John DePietro Show, and it is the great Seamus Bruner. Seamus, great honor to have you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us on the John DePietro Show.
Hey, John, great to be with you.
Seamus, first of all, if you know, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your take on. You did write a book that I think kind of ties into this. I want you to talk about that, but I really want to hear your take on what we're learning about the shooter, the accused, the suspect in this Charlie Kirk assassination.
Yeah, information is coming out fast, but it looks like there could be, according to Director Patel, dozens of people who had foreknowledge of the shooter's plans. They know they're trying to get to the bottom of it as quickly as possible. When they released the transcript of the text messages between the shooter and his roommate/lover, you know, I found it kind of fishy. It seemed odd. I mean, we don't know this, but it looked like almost scripted, like he had, they were having an exchange intended to exonerate the roommate, but the shooter slipped up when he said, you remember as I was engraving the rounds. So that implies that the roommate/lover was aware that he was at least putting together some rounds, including messages that said, hey, fascist, catch, which means, you know, I'm going to shoot you, catch this bullet. Unclear that he knew it would be Charlie Kirk. Of course, the messages that have been released seem to indicate the roommate was surprised. But as far as the dozens, more than 20, Director Patel said, people who may know, this shooter was in a number of groups, both in the gaming community and on Discord friend groups. And, we need to know who these people are who may have known and if they knew, because it is an odd case here. The guy, by all appearances, does not seem to be at least in the history of his life, does not seem to be the shooter type. His grandmother says he had no experience with guns. And so where did he learn how to shoot? It's not as easy a shot as some people think. I mean, a lot of people who shoot regularly say, I can make a 150-yard shot. But just imagine the pressure, someone who's never shot another human before, presumably, to do a one shot, one kill type thing. That's going to take some training, quite a bit of training maybe. So not sure who's involved yet. But lone gunman, I don't think has been totally conclusive right now.
Nassim, let's talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done in a revolutionary queer machine. That may surprise some people, but talk a little bit about it. You've done some great investigative work on this.
Yeah, sure. So there is a group called the Armed Queers of Salt Lake City. This is an Antifa, Trans-Tifa type group that is exactly like it sounds, armed queers who live around Salt Lake City. They have been put under investigation by the FBI. They scrubbed all of their social media the day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, which is a suspicious behavior, but not necessarily conclusive in any way. And before they were able to scrub everything, we were able to take screenshots, video recordings, and archive a number of their posts, their Substacks, a lot of their Instagram videos of the founder and leader of Armed Queers, a transgender man, male to female, named Ermaya Fanayan. That individual was also involved with a number of other left-wing organizations, the ACLU, the DNC, and this Utah Global Diplomacy entity that was getting USAID or State Department money of some kind. The State Department just the day before yesterday revoked and canceled all grants to this entity. So the State Department's not playing around. And here's the foreign connection, the revolutionary connection. Armed Queers of Salt Lake City took a trip just this past May down to Cuba. Pretty long way to travel for people in Utah all the way to Cuba. And what were they doing there but attending a May Day Workers of the World Unite type training session for revolutionary Marxists? And who puts on this training session for American groups to come down to Cuba? None other than Neville Roy Singham's People's Forum. And if you don't know who Neville Roy Singham is, my colleague Peter Schweitzer exposed him in the book Blood Money as a major agent of the Chinese Communist Party. So this guy lives in Shanghai, but has a bunch of NGOs set up in the United States. The People's Forum is one of the most prominent. And he is, fomenting unrest in this country. He's been reported to be behind the anti-ICE riots. I mean, going back to the Black Lives Matter riots, but anti-ICE riots out in Los Angeles, the pro-Hamas riots up in New York City on October 8th, 2023, and all kinds of other unsavory and un-American events. He is now apparently bankrolling or otherwise backing the groups in Cuba who are training Armed Queers of Salt Lake City how to execute revolution in the United States. So, I mean, it's shocking stuff. I didn't know most of this stuff, certainly not the Armed Queers part of it. Knew who Neville Roy Singham was, but the more we follow the money, the more insidious it gets. Now, to be clear, there's no connection at this time between Armed Queers, Neville Roy Singham, etc., to the Charlie Kirk assassin. However, we do know that Armed Queers is under investigation by the FBI.
Seamus, President Trump this week also said that he's considering maybe Antifa should be really listed as like a terrorist organization. Now, you have a lot of knowledge. You've written a lot about that. What is your thought on that?
Thoughts are complicated because terror is a calling some group a terrorist group is a double-edged sword. Certainly, Antifa does things that terrorize people. It uses violence to perpetrate and execute political objectives. And so it seems to fit the definition of a terrorist organization. We know when another administration's in power, they use the same thing against Catholics and pro-life groups. So you don't want to be too hasty with that kind of thing. But if anybody qualifies for a domestic terrorist organization, it would be Antifa. They have been committing violence all across the country, and they plan it that way. I mean, they are planning to be troublemakers, to put it gently. But to be violent and overthrow and Marxist objectives, seditious insurrection type behavior is more accurate.
Seamus, I'm very curious about your knowledge or just your thoughts on, there is this weird dynamic, odd, strange, curious dynamic to me regarding the trans movement and Antifa. And just, I had some experience 5 years ago, believe it or not, during the summer of 2020. There was an Antifa chapter in our area. There was activity because probably so close to New York, but both, Providence and Boston had it. And what I used to, I interact a lot with the police. I work with the police, covered the police. And they would always say that the Antifa members that they would arrest, it was always odd. The guys were wearing like women's underwear and clothing somewhat. And they all have, if someone was Steve, suddenly they go by the name of Stone. And it just seems to be this curious dynamic of the transgender movement. The police would always call me like, it's so odd. We arrested 4 of them last night. They're all wearing like women's underwear. They have nail polish. Their names are all, changed. So it's very, it's not exactly their name. What could you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, the crossover is immense between these Marxist groups and the people who want to upend capitalism. I mean, they hate traditional family values. They're atheists or other, and so yeah, it's so big and it's so foreign to a lot of people in the audience and just everywhere in America. We just you don't understand it. It helps to go to the beginning. The path to becoming a transgender member of Antifa really begins at a young age. Let's say a drag queen story hour, or when you're in the classrooms and you have, in a lot of cases, teachers who are members of Antifa themselves, and they are pushing this woke nonsense under banners like diversity, equity, inclusion, or social emotional learning, things that you don't really know what they mean. Well, what they're doing is they're deconstructing the identity of young people, teaching them that they can be whatever they want, even a furry or something like a dog. I mean, putting litter boxes in the classroom, literally scrambling the kids' brains into thinking that you can, emotions are whatever they want, and kids are going through, hormonal changes. They get them young, they groom them young, and then they get involved in, activism or a lot of online groups. A lot of these people are extremely online. They get involved in these sort of nihilistic gamer groups where there's a lot of killing going on, and it's a recipe for disaster. And then, maybe they have a good life at home. Oftentimes they do not. And they don't have much to live for. And then they find camaraderie in the groups of, activist groups who think that they're overthrowing the system or, bringing about some socialist utopia. It's pretty tragic stuff, but it is a long march from when they first get exposed to the transgender ideologies, and then they're beat over the head and put, social pressures, peer pressures into accepting it. You can see the social contagion, by the way. I mean, there were no transgenders in schools a couple of decades ago, and now the schools are full of them. So it starts in the schools.
Seamus, it does start in the schools. And we've heard stories locally in our area, very progressive school committee members and people. They did actually put a litter box in some schools in North Kingstown, encouraging the kids to dress up and identify as animals. These are, and unfortunately, they tend to be a lot of the kids that are kind of the social misfits, and they set them off on this path. Were you surprised to hear that the suspect, the shooter, allegedly, but was very into this. It's I have to admit I'm unfamiliar with it, but this like furry porn and it's a thing, and you see the roommate dressed in like fur outfits. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wasn't actually surprised. I'm not familiar. I'm not like you. Was not familiar about a year ago with any of this stuff, and unfortunately have been forced to learn some of these terms that I would rather not know. But yeah, furries and transgender violence. I mean, you saw it in the Nashville shooter. It actually going back to like the Christchurch in New Zealand shooter. These
Yes.
extremely online individuals. Are part there's a lot of communities out there, like our online communities, where violence for violence sake, I mean, there's a spiritual component to this that often gets overlooked. It's evil. I mean, these people are involved in email. I don't know if they're demonically possessed or if there's just a lot of evil lingering in the rooms, but they're into violence, both sides. It's hard for people to talk about because both sides kind of want to rush to, and I'm not saying that that's exactly what's going on with Charlie Kirk, but we're seeing a rise of this nihilistic violence from people who don't fit neatly into boxes of left or right. They don't fit neatly into the Republican versus Democrat paradigm, and so you don't get to most people don't really understand. Like, so this is a pro-gun owner, but he's also Marxist, and he's also he fits sort of into a libertarian box, or but he's also into transgenders. It's very weird stuff. And again, I'd say it goes back to the schools confusing children about identity.
Folks, again, it is Seamus Bruner. Seamus, how can people learn more about you, read some of your brilliant writings? How can people say, wow, this is really interesting? How can I learn more about it?
Well, thank you. I'm on all platforms, mostly Twitter at Seamus Bruner, SeamusBruner, SeamusBruner.com, and the book, the most recent book titled Control Oligarchs. It's the word control and oligarchs smashed together. Controloligarchsbook.com. It's on all book retailer websites, and it really gets into Soros and all of the other left-wing funding networks that are behind a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, no, it was being funded. I don't know about it anymore. Seamus, excellent to talk to you. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you.
All right, folks, there it is. Seamus Bruner right here. Now, again, I fully recognize with some people, this does seem a little bit of like, what exactly are they talking about? I'll explain. I'll explain it. And I one thing I'm confident in is I believe we're the only local media that focuses on it, talks about it. I encountered them, not so much lately, but 5 years ago, they seemed to have more funding, and they were definitely more prevalent. But they're around, and because of the online presence, they're very around. I want to remind you about quality asphalt seal coating, and the best thing. Call Corey today. You see the phone number on the screen, 401-283-9. You can find them on Facebook. Quality asphalt seal coating. They will epoxy your garage. They epoxy garages, patios. It makes a huge difference for your garage or patio, decorative concrete flooring, but it's not that expensive. But you have to call now and at least get the free estimate, because there's only this time of year. The clock is ticking, and then because of the weather, they have to shut down for the wintertime. Call them. They can also resurface a sport court, pickleball, tennis, basketball. Call Corey today, but especially tell him you'd love to get an estimate, have your they epoxy garages and patios, decorative concrete flooring. 401-283-9815. So I don't even like actually thinking about this a little bit, but I did experience it. And those of you that have followed the program in the summer of 2020 was when I saw it up firsthand. We had on a guest, Andy Go. He's talked about some of the Antifa members, Portland, Seattle. And when you see these people, they're angry and they're crazed. And there's definitely this trans part of this dynamic. I don't know what to make of it that kicks in. And then you learn, I mean, some of the stuff, I don't know, the headlines just seem very odd about the suspect, the shooter, and then the roommate. But I'll tell you what I saw firsthand, summer 2020. Those of you that watched, we would cover some of the protests. They were mostly focused in the west end of Providence, heavy drug use, and they'd be very active. A lot of times with the BLM protests, what people didn't understand is predominantly the crowd was 75% white, and a huge part of that were the Antifa members. But they're whacked. And I remember talking to law enforcement, and a lot of the individuals that they would arrest, they thought they were men. They painted their nails. They wore their hair into ponytails, but then they'd be adamant, no, my pronouns are she, her. And they would be wearing women's underwear. And again, whacked out on drugs, crazy violent. And when we go by Dexter Park, that was ground zero. I remember being in Dexter Park summer of 2020, and you'd see the plates from New York. You'd see the plates from Washington State and, Portland, Oregon, and Seattle. And they were teaching and setting up chapters. And Providence seemed, I know Woonsocket had some Antifa, but mainly it was in Providence. And there was a lot of weird stuff with animals, but it was heavy drug use. And then, they'd wear, I think of when I would try to explain it to someone, there was a police officer who was trying to explain it to me. And I finally said, it's like the guy in Silence of the Lambs. I think it was Buffalo Bill that they'd catch. And it's just the makeup and the hair, and they're wearing women's clothes, but they're a guy, but they're wildly violent, unbelievably violent. And when the police would arrest them, because they would just go ballistic. And one night in the West End, they were screaming at me and chanting my name, Johnny, like that. And they were, when they arrested them, they said they were bouncing off the walls at the police station in the cell. And the mugshots, they all predominantly white, mostly white, but just, they look, and you could see it in the eyes, they look odd. And what I think is really dangerous right now, I traveled to, and again, I know some of this stuff, people, like what is going on, but you have to know if it's around you. Where Seamus is exactly right is the schools. See, notice they go into the schools, but I'll tell you who they target. They don't go after the A students. Not necessarily. They don't go after the quarterback. They don't go after, most of the time, they don't go after children that are in what we might describe as stable homes, right? Like two-parent households. They target the confused. They target the misfits. And that's who they are grooming and going after. And he's exactly right about the drag queens. We had the kid at CCRI in the lizard outfit. North Kingstown, they had the kids dressing up as cats. Kids were, and that Jen Lima, she's one of them. She's one of the leaders of the movement. She's one of the ones. She's school committee, good friends with Pork Boy, by the way. Now, do you see the parallels? Naked fat coach, right? Getting in closets with kids and, having them undress and then touching their private area. And then you have a really whacked school committee person, and they're putting a litter box in the school, and they're having the kids dress up in furry outfits, and some of the kids are hissing and meowing and laying on the rug. I mean, it's so whacked. But but there's a rhyme and reason to it. And I'll show you exactly who it is. And again, I want to give credit. Now, this book that's out right now, you know what? I just want to draw a parallel right now. In when was it? In this late winter, early spring of 2022. I went 15 days to Israel with other members of the media, other journalists, and we traveled the countryside and all the different areas. And you go into, obviously, Bethlehem, and I still remember being in the Golan Heights, and then we were also in the West Bank. There's the Gaza Strip. Tel Aviv was beautiful. But one of the things that stood out to me was the more you learned about some of the suicide bombers that they had, right, that the Palestinians would use, it wasn't the biggest and the bravest. What they would do is they would prey on young girls who had drug problems and become prostitutes, or young kids that were confused about their gender. And they felt lost and ashamed. A lot of times there was always heavy drugs. But the Palestinians would convince them the way that you can bring some honor to your family would be to strap on this explosive and walk into a grocery store. And by the way, they didn't even depend on them to detonate it. They would have someone with a device nearby. So even if the young person, and they were young, even if they lost their nerve or couldn't go through with it, they weren't depending on it. They would just, all they really needed them to do was wear it. They didn't many times tell them where they were going, what they do, but they'd convince them to go on to a bus. I was in the West Bank when someone detonated, a suicide bomber was on a bus. It was so frightening. And we were a pretty good distance away, but you could hear it, and then just the carnage. And then, and they don't tell them a lot of times. When you had the Beslan school takeover, 2004, that was September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 3 days in September, when the Chechen rebels took over that school, southern part of Russia. And there were a number of women that were part of the Chechen rebels, and they put bombs on them. And they had not told them that it was going to be a school. And they had 1,100 people, mostly children, in a school gymnasium. And then, how many was it? 180 children died, over 300 people total, because there were parents and teachers and adults, and it was the first day of learning. But anyhow, but they put bombs on a lot of the women, because some of the women that were the Chechen rebels, they were not told that the target was a school. So they started having second thoughts. I don't know if we should do that. And they would just detonate the bomb. So my point is, there's definitely a concerted effort to target confused youth. And you don't hear about that, right? Like right now, and the reason I put this is the head of the teachers union. This is her book, president of the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. Do you understand that she is in control of the Woonsocket school system? She's in control of the Providence school system. She's in control of the Warwick school system. Randy Weingarten. No shame. She's on a book tour right now. The book is out. Why Fascists Fear Teachers. What was on one of the cartridge of Charlie Kirk? Hey, catch fascists, catch fascists. Like, here you go. Now, to me, a reasonable individual would say, well, maybe this isn't the time to have that type of book. Not this crowd. Nope, no backing down with her. So, yeah, then you had Lima, North Kingstown. They had the litter box to make kids feel comfortable. No, you're 12 years old. You're not a cat. You don't lay around on the rug and hiss at people. You don't go to the bathroom in a litter box, but they confuse them. I don't know. They would say, we're just trying to adapt to the child. I'm not convinced of that. Local media right now they're in a desperate move right now to try to label with what happened in Borington with the teacher. They're really trying to run cover for this Barrington guy. And they're trying to, this is a freedom. You're going to keep all the local stories. This is about freedom of speech. This is about freedom of speech. He would encourage his students to watch his TikTok videos. Right now in our local press, the ACLU, shame on Kathy Gregg. Well, according to the ACLU, this teacher has freedom of speech, right? That the coach saying this is chilling to teachers' freedom of speech outside the classroom. We all know that's not what we're talking about, because teachers is one of those occupations, and it's much like, let's say this individual was somehow, there's a lot of different activity. There's a code of conduct for teachers, as I've talked about, teachers, doctors, first responders, many of their professions, especially paid by the taxpayers. He can't just say, hey, I'm entitled to my, amongst his family and friends, 100%. But we know, so does that mean freedom of speech? So he could go to what, a restaurant after school and whatever, racist speech or maybe, insulting or, sexual talk there are teachers that say, oh yeah, I make adult films on the weekend, but I'm a teacher during the week. And then the schools say, no, we don't want someone like, well, that's my free time. No, this guy is encouraging his students to watch his TikTok videos. But I've noticed that the local press, they're really running cover for the Barrington teacher. And they're trying to say, this is a slippery slope and free speech and look at Jimmy Kimmel and blah, blah, blah. Listen, ABC Disney, they're going to have to make a decision as to what should happen regarding Jimmy Kimmel. And they will decide. Maybe their affiliates say, yeah, put him back on. Or maybe they're going to say, you know what, we don't need that type of nonsense. That is a business decision that they're going to be able to make. But I noticed that the local press is definitely jumping on board with this argument that, the free speech is under attack. Free speech is under attack, even though this same crowd, like we know, if someone is, notice that teacher in Borington, he felt Charlie Kirk should not have the right to talk. He should just be quiet. He should be silenced. That's their position. Folks, this portion of our program is brought to you by ServPro. ServPro of Providence. Remember, home is where life happens. Something happens to your home or business. Disaster strikes. Maybe there's a fire. And then you have water damage, smoke damage, or mold. ServPro of Providence. They're fast, thorough, professional. Call them 401-941-5500, 401-941-5500. ServPro of Providence. You need someone that you can depend on. And you can depend, I'm telling you, that you could depend on ServPro of Providence. So I want to highlight. So right now, what's going to happen with this teacher in Barrington? I think some people have an unrealistic concept of they want to drag this out. ABC Disney is going to have to decide what they're going to have to do with Jimmy Kimmel. But as I've talked about and other people have mentioned, it wasn't even accurate. And I am surprised. The Jimmy Kimmel show is taped. And I am surprised there wasn't someone on the show that said, is this really the area we want to go down? So, but locally, I want to, draw attention to the fact, Gabe Amo, he's the congressman in the 1st District. He will be asking for the people of the 1st District to send him back to Congress next fall. That's when the midterms are. So he cast a vote against. It was just a simple resolution. It wasn't a statue. It wasn't a just a resolution about Charlie Kirk. And Rhode Island Congressman Gabe Amo voted no. Why? Why did he have to vote no? Don't say everyone voted no, because Seth Magaziner voted in favor of it, Congressman Magaziner. So I believe, and this is not a matter of what, he doesn't have the right. We're not talking about whether he has the right. We're talking about whether it was the right vote. And he absolutely has, of course, he has the right to vote. If not him, then who? But I think people in the 1st District, they have the right to maybe contact his office and say, hey, I'm not crazy about that vote that you took. You're not listening to me. Gabe Amo, he could have voted. Seth Magaziner voted in favor of the resolution. So you have one, but But Gabe Amo, see, I've talked about it. The rest of the media gave him a free pass. He's on board with the squad. He's on board with Talib. He's on board with AOC. He is. Gabe Amo, he's radical. When he was running for office, he did a fundraiser with, he had no problem, members of the squad, they were anti-Semitic. He had no problem. He did a fundraiser. It was like a fundraiser, I believe, with BLM, which is, they're certainly violent. I think people have a right to just hear why he voted no. I think that's fair. So, and anyone that contacts his office, you don't have to be rude. You don't have to be rude because they don't have to listen to that. But I'd be curious to hear that. Why he voted against it. What do I think of Congressman Amo? I think he's an empty suit. Excuse me. It cured me. Get away from me. I think he's an empty suit. He hasn't accomplished anything, that's for sure. But ultimately, I think a fair question would be, Congressman, why did you vote against the resolution to honor Charlie Kirk? I think it's a fair question. And then see what his answer is. Maybe he didn't know what he was voting on. Maybe he did not like Charlie Kirk. Maybe he's one of those people that's saying privately, yeah, I'm glad. I don't know what the answer is. But I do know that Watson Materials carries the largest selection of landscape materials in Rhode Island. Folks, call Sean at Watson, 401-885-0600, 401-885-0600, Watson Materials. It is incredible. This is the perfect time to make the most of your outdoor space, and they have everything you need. More and more people have fire pits, and people are eating outside, or a lot of people go all out. They have the flat screen. Their outside space becomes an extension of their home. Call Sean at Watson Materials, 401-885-0600. So I want to, in all fairness, I think, Sunday really sounds pretty remarkable. This is going to be a Super Bowl type event. And we can only hope that security, they're going to have Super Bowl level security. When you're going to have President Trump and you're going to have Vice President Vance and all these dignitaries out there for the funeral of Charlie Kirk, that is something to be on guard with. So, but I think we're at a perilous time. I want to just check right now and make sure I'm not missing anything that might be breaking. As I said earlier, I don't understand. There's a bias in our local media. In times like this, it's coming out. It's coming out. And it's coming out in the fact that there is the teachers union, this Randy Weingarten, she's very powerful. And she controls the Providence schools. That's who they answer to. Same thing with, as I said, Warwick, Woonsocket. There's two teachers unions, Rhode Island. Barrington is the NEA, National Education Association, Rhode Island. Now that's the Senate President, Val Lawson. She's the president of that teachers union. But you know what is, and it should stand out to people, what's remarkable is that our local media, they don't even say to the Senate President, Val Lawson, what do you think of the Randy Weingarten book that she's calling Republican parents? She's calling them fascists. And I also want to just mention this jerk. I'm not disturbing the peace. I'm disturbing your peace. Boston protester arrested at the vigil. That's what he said. I'm not disturbing the peace. I'm disturbing your peace. Who would go to a prayer vigil and start protesting? It's clear to me there's something wrong with the Democrat Party. And you don't hear any local Dems condemning it. I noticed that someone like Helena Folks, she didn't comment on the death of Charlie Kirk, but she weighed in on Jimmy Kimmel. Now, she's running for governor. Notice, I haven't heard any member of the media even ask her, Helena Bonanno folks, ask her, how come you didn't put anything out about Charlie Kirk? She appeared in newspapers and gave the boilerplate, there's no need for political violence, but that was it. Don't think how ghastly it was, how violent it was. Nothing like that. Folks, this is a dangerous time for who it is that's targeting your children. And that's why you remember, you can depend on Kids Club. Kids Club on the Pike. They are so fantastic. I get great feedback from people that end up bringing their children or grandchildren to Kids Club on the Pike. Because remember, they do birthday parties, before and after school program, preschool program. Kids Club on the Pike. It's a perfect venue for a teen party, anything with children. Or they also do before and after school care, preschool, but it's really tremendous for any celebration. Maybe your children are on a football team or a fall ball team or a cheer team or a soccer team, whatever type of team. Or maybe you just want to throw a great birthday party for your child. Kids Club on the Pike. That's what they're there for. Located right off of 295 on Plainfield Pike. They're on the Cranston-Johnston line. And as I've said, you're not going to have drag queens during story hour at Kids Club on the Pike. Not at all. So, but I do notice that no one in the local media has even said, gee, I wonder what Val Lawson, the president of the Rhode Island Senate. Now, a lot of people don't know exactly who she is, but she took over for Ruggiero, who passed away. This is who they chose. She is, in fact, the president of the Senate. Now, first, we had to shame her into introducing some kind of a statement condemning the shooting of Charlie Kirk. And the only reason she did, listen, the shooter was basically a school shooter. Now, she doesn't answer to Randy Weingarten, but she could still be asked, what do you think about that book title? Why Fascists Fear Teachers, Public Education, Future of Democracy. Randy Weingarten, president of the American AFT, American Federation of Teachers. I'll go first. We know it's a fact that they have the bullet, catch fascists. You would think something might go off, that someone might think, maybe I need to rethink the title here, right? At the very least, someone could comment about it. Many times, that's not the first time that's happened. I remember you hear stories of, there were people that had movies, terrorism films that were then pulled, that were supposed to run and open in theaters the week after September 11th. That's happened before. So, but just be very clear. This is the president of the teachers union. Why fascists fear teachers? Woonsocket, very confident they are AFT. It's AFT, American Federation of Teachers, and NEA Rhode Island. Now, those are the two teachers unions. But Weingarten, ultimately, Calabro, the Providence teachers are AFT. Warwick is AFT. Woonsocket is AFT. I don't know. Pawtucket may be AFT. I'm not sure. Barrington is NEA Rhode Island. Barrington, that teacher that's on paid vacation right now, that teacher reports to the president of the Senate. All I'm suggesting is you would think our local media might say to the Senate president, Val Lawson, who's the president, Rhode Island president of NEA Rhode Island, do you think that's an appropriate title? I'm not saying she's going to answer. I'm not saying you have to like her answer. She might try to dodge, but it's not lost on me that they don't even answer the question. Don't even answer the question. Jillian's right. Kids Club is wonderful. So I think we're at, they're trying to justify Jimmy Kimmel. There was no reason for that, as I've said. Number one, I played the cut. I don't even think it was that funny. It wasn't really much of a joke. The shooter the shooter is not a member of MAGA. The shooter's not a Trump supporter. He's the opposite of a Trump supporter. If we're to believe the documents that are out there, the motivating factor for the killer of Charlie Kirk was the furry transgender boyfriend. As Montel Williams said on CNN, this is a love story. I mean, they're whacked. All right. I want to thank Gian. Thank you, everybody. What a week it has been. Now, remember, if you're listening to the radio, stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news. Everyone else, we will be active this weekend. Yes, with Road Patrol Live. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe out there. We'll continue to bring you the latest. Again, everyone on the radio, stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news. And we'll see you later tonight on Road Patrol Live.